Hello. Last week we learned how to go from factored form into standard form by multiplying binomials. And one way that we did that is we used boxes. And we kind of multiplied into the boxes like with Punnett squares from biology. This week we're going to learn how to go the other way. This week we're going to start with standard form and go back to factored form. So the first, really the way that we do that is we just essentially undo the boxes. So if we think about this is the result of a box. So let's make our boxes over here. Okay, so it looks like that. And we know from doing the boxes last week that x squared is going to be what's in that box. And 12 is going to be what's in that box. And then these two boxes are going to add up to be 7x, whatever those end up being. Now we're going to fill in what would have to go on the outside to make that happen. So we know that the only way to get x squared is to do x times x. So we know that those are both going to be x's. Now we have to think about whatever goes here and here has to multiply to be 12 and also cause these two to add up to be a 7x. So first let's just think all the ways to multiply to be 12. So we have 1 and 12, right? Because 1 times 12 is 12. So this could be a 1 and that could be a 12. Let's think of some more. We could also have -1 and -12. We could have 2 and 6. That could be a 2, that could be a 6, and that would put a 12 right there. Or -2 times -6, because remember a negative times a negative would give us a positive 12. Another way that multiplies to be 12 is 3 and 4, or we could think of that as -3 and -4. So those are all the ways to multiply to be 12 if we're just talking about integers, no decimals here. So now our question is, which option is the right one? Which option would make it so that these two also are going to add up to be a 7x? And the one that we're going to choose is 3 and 4. Because 3 and 4 also adds to be 7. So these are all options that multiply to be 12. 3 and 4 also adds to give you this 7. So we're going to put a 3 on one side and a 4 on the other. Remember, it doesn't matter because when you multiply and add, order doesn't matter. They're commutative. So when we do this, just to double check then, x times 3 gives us 3x. 4 times x gives us 4x. And 4x and 3x really will add to be this 7x. That means that the two factors that you would multiply to get this standard form expression right here is going to be that and that. So if we're going to write this in factored form, we would have x plus 3 is one factor, and x plus 4 is the other factor. So we're essentially just working, instead of having the outsides and multiplying into the box, now we have some clues about what the inside looks like. We need to figure out what the outside has to be to get us there. Essentially, we're going backwards to go from standard form back to factored form. So let's try this one. I'm going to make my boxes. And I know that x squared goes there. And 15 will go there. Now I need to figure out what is going to multiply to 15 and also add to be -8. I know that I have an x times x will give me the x squared there, so I know that much. Now what are some ways to get 15? I have 1 times 15 or -1 times -15 because a negative times a negative would give me a positive. Or 3 times 5 gives me 15, or -3 times -5 gives me 15. So those are all the ways to multiply to get 15. The question is, which one of those will also give me a -8? And the answer is -3 and -5. Because if I make that a -3 and that a -5, I'll get -3x and negative 5x, which is going to add up to be negative 8x. So that means my two factors are going to be x minus 3 and x minus 5. A common mistake when people do this is they forget to think about the negatives, but sometimes the negatives are what's going to get you what you need. So it's important to also remember the negatives. Okay? Now let's look down here. There's two more examples of something slightly different happening. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to draw my box so I can start to think about what's going to have to go on the outside. I know that x squared is going to be in that first box. Negative 14 is going to be down here. I also know that x times x is the way that I'm going to get x squared. So now I have to try to figure out what is going to add to be a 5 and multiply to be a negative 14. So let's first think about all the ways to multiply to get negative 14. We have 1 times negative 14 or negative 1 times positive 14. Because it has to multiply to be a negative, one of my numbers is going to be negative. I don't know which one yet though. Also, there's 2 times negative 7 or negative 2 times a positive 7. So those are the ways to multiply to be negative 14. And the one that's going to also add to be a positive 5 is this right here. Negative 2 plus 7 gives me a positive 5. So that's the pair that I'm going to choose to finish out each of my factors. So I'm going to put a negative 2 on one side and a 7 on the other. That would give me a negative 2x there and 7x, which when you combine those, you do indeed get a 5x. Which means that x minus 2 and x and a positive 7, so x minus 2, x plus 7, those are my two factors. Okay, and then lastly, we'll try this last one down here. Okay, I know x squared goes in that box. I know negative 10 goes in that box. I know x times x. Now, what are all the ways to multiply to be negative 10? We have 1 and negative 10, negative 1 and positive 10, 2 and negative 5, negative 2 and positive 5. And the one that's going to combine to give me a negative 3 would be this one, because 2 plus negative 5 is negative 3. So I'm going to put a 2 on one side and a negative 5 on the other. I can double check. 2 times x is 2x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5x plus 2x is indeed negative 3x, so it works, which means that my two factors are x plus 2 and x minus 5. Now this is helpful because if you have standard form and you want to know what the solutions are, if you can just switch it to factored form, and the more you do this, the easier it will be. Eventually you won't even have to use the boxes. You can just kind of look at it, think about it for a second, and probably know what it is. The more you practice and the better you get. You can easily spot where the solutions to each graph are going to be. I hope this is helpful. Go ahead and try the practice, see how you do. In the next video, we're going to try to do this without using the boxes and just kind of come up with a way of thinking about it so that you don't have to draw the boxes every time. Good luck with the practice. Email me if you have questions, or I will see you at our next meeting. Thanks.